They thought they had you figured out. They looked at your silence and called it weakness. They looked at your patience and called it fear. They looked at your kindness and assumed you would always accept less than you deserved. They convinced themselves that because you didn't fight every battle, you weren't capable of winning one. That is the dangerous mistake people make when they judge strength by noise instead of discipline. The loudest person in the room is rarely the strongest. The strongest person is usually the one who doesn't need to prove anything. They laughed because you stayed calm. They mocked you because you didn't react. They tested you because they believed there would never be consequences. But every test was quietly teaching you something they never intended to teach. Every betrayal sharpened your judgment. Every disappointment strengthened your character. Every setback forced you to build muscles that comfort could never create. Now they stand at a distance, confused by the person you've become. Now they know you're not to be played with. Not because you became cruel, not because you became angry, but because you became impossible to manipulate. People always underestimate what they cannot control. They assume your heart will always remain open after they repeatedly disrespect it. They assume your trust will always be available after they continuously abuse it. They believe your forgiveness means unlimited access. They mistake your compassion for permission. But life has a way of educating those who refuse to learn through wisdom. Eventually they discover that even the kindest soul has boundaries. Even the calmest spirit knows when to walk away. Even the most patient person reaches a moment where enough becomes enough. That moment changes everything. It changes the way you speak. It changes the way you move. It changes the way you value yourself. Suddenly, the same people who once ignored your worth begin searching for your attention. The same people who dismissed your presence begin noticing your absence. The game changes because you stopped playing by their rules. You realized your peace was more valuable than their approval, and once you understand that, nobody can hold your emotions hostage again. There comes a point where your confidence no longer depends on applause. Your identity no longer depends on acceptance. Your future no longer depends on permission. That's when you become dangerous, not dangerous to innocent people, but dangerous to every lie that tried to define you, because confidence backed by discipline is unstoppable. It cannot be bought. It cannot be borrowed. It cannot be destroyed by gossip or criticism. People can attack your reputation, but they cannot touch your purpose unless you hand it to them. They can spread stories, but stories cannot compete with consistent results. Success has a voice louder than rumors ever will. Excellence exposes every false accusation without saying a single word. That's why your responsibility isn't proving people wrong. Your responsibility is proving yourself right every single day. Wake up with purpose. Train your mind, build your body, strengthen your spirit. Let your habits become your argument. Let your discipline answer every question people have about you. The world respects standards even when it pretends not to. The moment people realize they cannot cross your boundaries without losing access to you, they begin treating you differently. Why? Because you've shown them your value isn't available at a discount. Too many people spend their lives negotiating away their dignity just to avoid conflict. They say yes when they should say no. They stay where they're disrespected because they're afraid of being alone. They tolerate betrayal because they're addicted to familiarity. But growth requires courage. Courage means disappointing people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. Courage means walking away from tables where your value isn't recognized. Courage means accepting temporary loneliness instead of permanent disrespect. That's not arrogance. That's self-respect. There's a difference. One demands attention. The other protects peace. Learn the difference because your future depends on it. The greatest comeback isn't revenge, it's transformation. Revenge keeps your focus on the people who hurt you. Transformation keeps your focus on the person you're becoming. One drains your energy, the other multiplies it. While they're watching your every move, wondering how to stop you, you're too busy building a life they can no longer influence. That's real power. Real power doesn't spend all day thinking about enemies. Real power wakes up thinking about purpose. It doesn't waste time arguing with critics. It spends time mastering its craft. It doesn't chase validation. It creates value. And when you consistently create value, the world eventually has no choice but to recognize it. You don't become unforgettable by demanding respect. You become unforgettable by becoming excellent. Never forget that pressure reveals truth. Diamonds don't apologize for being created under pressure. Steel doesn't complain about the fire that made it stronger. Neither should you. Every challenge you survived was preparing you for moments like this. Every sleepless night taught you endurance. Every rejection redirected you towards something greater. Every failure removed another layer of weakness you didn't know you had. Looking back, you realize your greatest pain became your greatest teacher. The people who tried to break you unknowingly participated in building the strongest version of you. They thought they were ending your story. In reality, they were introducing your next chapter. Watch how people's behavior changes when they realize you're no longer emotionally available for manipulation. Suddenly, they become nicer. Suddenly, they become respectful. Suddenly, they remember your value. But don't confuse changed behavior with changed character. Some people adjust only because the old tactics stopped working. Wisdom teaches you to observe patterns instead of believing promises. Listen less to words and more to consistency. Anybody can apologize. Anybody can make excuses. Anybody can say they've changed. Character is revealed over time, not through speeches. Protect your peace until actions prove what words claim. The strongest people are often the quietest because they've learned something most never will. They know every battle isn't worth fighting. They know emotional control is greater than emotional reaction. Anybody can lose their temper. Anybody can shout. Anybody can create drama. It takes real strength to remain composed when chaos invites you in. Self-control is one of the highest forms of power. When nobody can provoke you into becoming someone you're not, you've already won. Your enemies don't defeat you by attacking you. They defeat you only if they convince you to abandon your principles. Never give anyone that victory. Guard your character more fiercely than your reputation, because your reputation depends on what people think. Your character depends on who you truly are. There will always be people who underestimate you because they only remember the version of you that lacked confidence. Let them remember, while they're living in yesterday, you're building tomorrow. Never waste energy correcting outdated opinions. People are allowed to misunderstand you. They are allowed to doubt you. They are allowed to underestimate you. None of that changes what you're capable of becoming. Your future isn't determined by their imagination. It's determined by your commitment. Every morning, you have another opportunity to become more disciplined than you were yesterday. Another opportunity to become wiser than you were last year. Another opportunity to become stronger than the version they thought they could control. Now, they know you're not to be played with because your silence has become intentional. Your confidence has become unshakable. Your standards have become non-negotiable. Your focus has become unstoppable. You no longer beg for opportunities. You prepare for them. You no longer chase people. You attract the right ones by becoming the right person. You no longer fear losing those who never valued you because you've discovered something greater than approval. You've discovered purpose. And a person driven by purpose cannot be intimidated, distracted, manipulated, or defeated for long. They may delay your progress, but they cannot deny your destiny if you refuse to quit. Stand tall, stay disciplined, keep building. Let your life become undeniable proof that respect isn't demanded, it is earned. When your actions speak with consistency, excellence, and unwavering character, even those who once underestimated you will have no choice but to admit what they never wanted to believe. You were never someone to be played with. They looked at your silence and wrote a story that was never true. They watched you stay calm when others would have exploded, and they called you weak. They saw you walk away from unnecessary arguments, and they convinced themselves you were afraid. They noticed that you didn't need to prove yourself every single day, so they assumed you had nothing to prove. That's how shallow judgment works. It measures strength by volume instead of character. It mistakes patience for passivity. It confuses emotional control with emotional weakness. But there is something people fail to understand until it's too late. The strongest people are rarely the loudest. They don't waste energy announcing their power because real power doesn't need an introduction. It simply reveals itself when the moment demands it. While everyone else is busy reacting to every insult, every rumor, and every challenge, the truly disciplined person is quietly preparing, quietly learning, quietly growing. That preparation is invisible to the people who only judge what they can immediately see. They never realize that beneath your calm exterior, a stronger version of you is being built every single day. Every time someone underestimated you, they unknowingly handed you another opportunity to grow. Every insult became fuel instead of poison. Every betrayal became a lesson instead of a life sentence. Every rejection forced you to become more independent. What they intended to use against you became the very thing that strengthened you. That is the difference between a victim's mindset and a champion's mindset. A victim asks, "Why is this happening to me?" A champion asks, "What is this teaching me?" That single shift changes everything. Suddenly, pain is no longer your enemy. Failure is no longer your identity. Criticism is no longer something that destroys your confidence. Instead, each difficult experience becomes another brick in the foundation of your future. While others waste years complaining about what happened yesterday, you use yesterday to become stronger today. People often mistake kindness for weakness because they have never encountered disciplined strength. They assume that because you choose peace, you are incapable of conflict. They think your respect means submission. They believe your forgiveness means they can continue crossing the line without consequences. But forgiveness does not erase wisdom. Kindness does not cancel boundaries. Respect does not require accepting disrespect. There comes a moment when every strong person realizes that protecting their peace is not selfish, it is necessary. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop chasing those who only value your presence when it benefits them. You stop allowing your energy to be drained by people who contribute nothing but negativity. That decision changes everything. Suddenly, the same people who once took you for granted begin noticing that they no longer have access to the version of you they used to control. And that is when confusion turns into respect. Silence has a language that insecure people cannot understand. They believe that if you are not defending yourself, you must have already lost. They think that if you refuse to argue, they have somehow defeated you. But what they fail to recognize is that silence is often a strategy, not surrender. A person who knows who they are does not need to respond to every accusation. They do not need to fight every opinion. They understand that arguing with people who are committed to misunderstanding them only steals valuable time and energy. Instead of wasting hours proving their worth, they spend those hours improving their worth. While others are talking, they are working. While others are criticizing, they are creating. While others are laughing, they are learning. Eventually, the results become impossible to ignore. The same silence that people mocked becomes the reason they can no longer compete with you. There is an incredible difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is emotional, impulsive, and temporary. Responding is intentional, disciplined, and powerful. When someone insults you and you immediately lose control, they now control your emotions. But when you remain calm, think clearly, and choose your response wisely, you keep your power exactly where it belongs, with you. Emotional discipline is one of the rarest strengths in today's world because everyone is encouraged to react instantly. Social media rewards outrage. Arguments reward ego. Pride demands immediate revenge. But wisdom whispers something different. It says that not every battle deserves your attention. Not every insult deserves your response. Not every opinion deserves your energy. Once you understand this, your life becomes lighter. Your focus becomes sharper. Your decisions become wiser. And your confidence becomes rooted in something no one else can take away. The people who underestimated you never imagined that your quiet seasons were preparing you for your greatest victories. They believed your lack of reaction meant you lacked courage. They had no idea you were developing patience, resilience, wisdom, and discipline while they were distracted by appearances. They celebrated too early because they judged the first chapter of your story as if it were the ending. But life has a remarkable way of revealing truth over time. Eventually, results speak louder than opinions. Consistency speaks louder than gossip. Character outlasts popularity, and discipline defeats talent when talent refuses to grow. One day, the very people who once questioned your strength will have no choice but to acknowledge it, not because you demanded their respect, but because your life earned it. They will finally understand what they should have recognized from the beginning. Your silence was never weakness. It was controlled power. Your patience was never fear. It was preparation. And now they know beyond every doubt that you were never someone to be underestimated or played with. People never expect the day you finally stop accepting what once exhausted you. They become so comfortable with having unlimited access to your time, your energy, your emotions, and your kindness that they begin to believe it is their right rather than a privilege. They assume you will always answer the phone, always forgive the disrespect, always overlook the lies, always carry the relationship, always sacrifice your peace to keep everyone else comfortable. The dangerous part is that this pattern doesn't happen overnight. It happens one compromise at a time. One ignored red flag becomes another. One broken promise becomes another excuse. One act of disrespect becomes another habit. Before you realize it, people aren't treating you according to your value. They're treating you according to the standards you've allowed. That's why the day you decide to change your standards is the day everything around you begins to change. The people who once controlled the relationship suddenly realize they no longer control you. The same boundaries they once laughed at become walls they cannot cross. And that's when they finally understand that you're not someone to be played with anymore. One of the greatest lessons in life is that people don't always respect what is constantly available. Human nature often takes consistency for granted. When someone is always there, always giving, always understanding, people stop appreciating the sacrifice behind that generosity. They begin expecting what they should be grateful for. They mistake your loyalty for dependence. They mistake your patience for weakness. They mistake your silence for permission. But every healthy relationship, whether it's family, friendship, business, or love, requires boundaries. Boundaries are not punishments. They are protections. They protect your peace, your purpose, your emotional health, and your self-respect. Without boundaries, even good-hearted people can slowly lose themselves trying to satisfy everyone around them. The truth is simple. If you don't decide where the line is, someone else will decide it for you. And most people will keep moving that line until there's nothing left of you to protect. There comes a defining moment in every person's journey when they become tired of surviving on crumbs while pretending they're enjoying a feast. They become tired of making excuses for people who never make excuses for hurting them. They become tired of carrying relationships that everyone else keeps dropping. They become tired of apologizing for having needs, dreams, and standards. That moment is uncomfortable because growth usually begins where comfort ends. Saying no after years of saying yes feels unfamiliar. Walking away from toxic environments feels lonely at first. Refusing to entertain disrespect may even make some people angry. But here's the reality. People who benefited from your lack of boundaries will almost always resist your new ones. Not because you've become difficult, but because they've lost the ability to control you. Never mistake someone's disappointment for evidence that you're making the wrong decision. Sometimes their frustration is proof that you're finally making the right one. Self-respect is not something people hand to you. It is something you demonstrate through the choices you make every single day. Every time you tolerate behavior that destroys your peace, you're teaching people what you're willing to accept. Every time you remain silent when your values are violated, you're silently lowering your own standards. Every time you chase people who have already shown they don't value you, you're placing their opinion above your own worth. But the moment you begin honoring yourself, everything shifts. You stop begging for attention because you understand your value doesn't increase when someone notices you. You stop explaining yourself to people determined to misunderstand you because you've learned that clarity cannot change a closed mind. You stop competing for places where you were never meant to belong because purpose never requires you to abandon your dignity. That confidence doesn't come from arrogance. It comes from finally realizing that your peace is too expensive to trade for temporary acceptance. Some people will accuse you of changing when you establish healthy boundaries. They'll say you've become distant, cold, proud, or selfish. What they're really saying is that you've become unavailable for manipulation. They're uncomfortable because the version of you they once controlled no longer exists. They miss the person who always ignored their own needs to satisfy everyone else. But growth demands change. The caterpillar cannot become a butterfly while remaining comfortable inside the cocoon. Every level of growth requires leaving behind an old version of yourself. Not everyone will celebrate that transformation. Some people only liked you when you were easier to influence, easier to guilt, easier to pressure, easier to control. The stronger you become, the fewer people will have access to your life, and that's not a loss. That's wisdom. Your circle becomes smaller because your standards become higher. Boundaries are not about building walls to keep everyone out. They're about building gates that allow the right people in. Mature, respectful people don't fear your boundaries because they were never planning to violate them in the first place. The people who become offended are often the very ones who benefited from your silence. Healthy relationships thrive on mutual respect, honesty, accountability, and trust. They don't require one person to constantly sacrifice themselves while everyone else benefits. The strongest connections in life are built between people who respect each other's limits. They understand that love without respect becomes control. Kindness without boundaries becomes exploitation. Generosity without wisdom becomes exhaustion. That's why protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's responsible. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot inspire others while constantly abandoning yourself. The beautiful thing about boundaries is that they don't just change how other people treat you, they change how you see yourself. Every time you choose peace over chaos, your confidence grows. Every time you walk away from disrespect instead of chasing approval, your self-worth becomes stronger. Every time you refuse to compromise your values for temporary acceptance, your character becomes more unshakable. You begin carrying yourself differently. Your words become more intentional. Your decisions become clearer. Your presence becomes stronger because it's no longer built on insecurity, but on conviction. And people notice. The same individuals who once underestimated you begin approaching you differently because they recognize that the rules have changed. They understand they can no longer manipulate your emotions, guilt you into lowering your standards, or take your kindness for granted. Without raising your voice, without seeking revenge, and without trying to prove anything, you've sent a powerful message through your actions alone. Now they know your peace is protected, your standards are non-negotiable, your value is undeniable, and above all, you're no longer someone they can play with. Most people believe strength is measured by how loudly someone speaks, how aggressively they respond, or how quickly they fight back. They think power is found in raised voices, emotional outbursts, and dramatic reactions, but real strength operates by a completely different set of rules. The strongest people in the world are not controlled by their emotions. They control them. They understand that every reaction is a choice, and every choice shapes the direction of their life. Anyone can explode in anger. Anyone can lose control when they feel disrespected. Anyone can say words they regret in the heat of the moment. That requires no discipline. But remaining calm when chaos surrounds you, thinking clearly when everyone else is panicking, and making wise decisions while others are driven by emotion, that is rare. That is the kind of strength that cannot be faked. It is built over time, through pain, through setbacks, and through countless moments where you choose self-control over self-destruction. One of the greatest weapons people use against you is emotional manipulation. They study your triggers. They learn what makes you angry, what makes you insecure, what makes you doubt yourself. Then they push those buttons, hoping you'll react exactly the way they expect. Why? Because the moment they control your emotions, they begin controlling your decisions. An angry person says things they never meant to say. A fearful person makes choices they never should have made. An insecure person settles for things they never deserved. That is why emotional discipline is not just a personality trait. It is a form of protection. The moment you stop giving people the reaction they expected, you remove one of the greatest sources of power they thought they had over you. Your silence frustrates them. Your patience confuses them. Your calmness unsettles them because they realize they can no longer predict your behavior. They discover that the person they once believed was easy to manipulate has become emotionally untouchable. There is a powerful difference between reacting and responding. A reaction is immediate, emotional, and often driven by impulse. A response is thoughtful, intentional, and guided by wisdom. Imagine someone insults you. A reaction is allowing their words to dictate your emotions, raising your voice, and creating a conflict that benefits no one. A response is recognizing that another person's opinion does not define your identity. It's understanding that not every criticism deserves your attention, and not every accusation deserves your defense. When you respond instead of react, you keep control of your mind, you protect your peace instead of surrendering it. You choose your future instead of allowing someone else's negativity to choose it for you. This kind of discipline doesn't make you weak. It makes you dangerous in the best possible way because people can no longer manipulate your emotions to influence your actions. The world today rewards instant reactions. Social media encourages people to respond before they think. News spreads faster than truth. Opinions are formed before facts are understood. Everyone wants immediate answers, immediate revenge, immediate satisfaction. But wisdom has never operated on the clock of impatience. Wisdom pauses. Wisdom observes. Wisdom asks questions before making conclusions. That's why emotionally mature people don't rush into every argument or every battle. They know that some conflicts are designed only to distract them from their purpose. They understand that every unnecessary fight costs time, energy, focus, and peace. Instead of proving themselves to people who have already decided to misunderstand them, they invest that energy into becoming better. While others are trapped in endless drama, they are quietly building a life that speaks louder than any argument ever could. One of the greatest signs of personal growth is discovering that you no longer feel the need to defend yourself against every opinion. There was a time when criticism could ruin your entire day. A single negative comment would stay in your mind for hours. Someone's rejection would make you question your worth. Someone's betrayal would convince you that you weren't enough. But maturity changes your perspective. You begin to understand that people speak from their own experiences, their own fears, and their own limitations. Not every opinion is truth. Not every judgment deserves your attention. The opinions of people who don't understand your journey should never become the foundation of your identity. Once you truly believe that, your confidence becomes unshakable because it is no longer built on approval. It is built on conviction. You stop living to impress others and start living according to your purpose. Emotional control also means mastering yourself during success, not just during hardship. Many people know how to stay humble when they have nothing, but they lose themselves the moment they achieve something. Pride replaces gratitude. Ego replaces wisdom. Arrogance replaces discipline. Real strength refuses to let success become another form of weakness. You remember where you came from. You stay teachable even after you begin winning. You remain respectful even after people begin respecting you. You continue working even after others begin celebrating you. That's the difference between temporary success and lasting greatness. Emotional discipline keeps your feet on the ground while your dreams continue reaching higher. It reminds you that every new level requires an even greater level of character. The people who once believed they could provoke you become frustrated when they realize their old methods no longer work. They throw criticism at you, but you don't lose your focus. They spread rumors, but you don't abandon your purpose. They attempt to discourage you, but you keep moving forward with quiet confidence. Your greatest victory isn't proving them wrong through words, it's proving them powerless through your consistency. They expected the old version of you, the one who reacted emotionally, argued endlessly, and allowed every opinion to shake your confidence. Instead, they encounter someone completely different, someone who thinks before speaking, someone who chooses peace over unnecessary conflict, someone who refuses to let temporary emotions destroy permanent opportunities. That's when they finally recognize a truth they never expected to face. They can no longer play with your mind because you've mastered it yourself. They can no longer control your emotions because you've placed your purpose above your feelings. And once a person reaches that level of emotional discipline, they become almost impossible to stop because the greatest battle they needed to win was never against other people. It was always within themselves. Now they know you're not to be played with, but not because you became louder, more aggressive, or more intimidating. They know because they watch something inside you change. They watch the person who once tolerated disrespect begin to value peace more than approval. They watch the one who used to explain every decision become comfortable letting actions speak instead of words. They watch the person they thought they understood become someone they could no longer predict. That is what unsettles people the most. Human beings feel comfortable when they can predict your reactions. If they know exactly what makes you angry, they know how to control you. If they know exactly what makes you insecure, they know where to attack you. If they know exactly how far they can push you before you respond, they believe they have power over you. But the moment you become emotionally disciplined, mentally focused, and deeply rooted in your purpose, that power disappears. Suddenly, the same people who once believed they had you figured out begin questioning everything they thought they knew. They realized they were never dealing with weakness. They were dealing with patience. They mistake silence for surrender until one day they discover it was preparation all along. Confidence is a strange thing because the world often misunderstands it. Many people think confidence means being the loudest voice in the room, demanding attention, or constantly reminding others of your value. Real confidence doesn't behave that way. It doesn't need to announce itself because it is secure enough to let results speak. A confident person doesn't chase acceptance because they already know who they are. They don't seek validation from people who never intended to appreciate them. They don't spend every day trying to convince others of their worth because they have already settled that question within themselves. This kind of confidence cannot be manufactured overnight. It is built through difficult mornings, lonely seasons, painful lessons, and quiet victories that nobody else sees. Every obstacle you survived added another layer to your belief in yourself. Every promise you kept to yourself strengthened your character. Every challenge you refused to quit on reminded you that your strength was never dependent on easy circumstances. That's why your confidence today feels different. It's no longer based on feelings. It's based on evidence. You've seen what you can survive, and once you've survived what once terrified you, fear begins to lose its power over your future. Your standards have also changed, and that alone has transformed your life. There was a time when you accepted treatment that never matched your value because you feared losing people. You tolerated dishonesty because you hoped things would improve. You accepted excuses because you wanted to believe the best in everyone. You carried relationships that only one person was working to maintain. But life taught you a lesson that no classroom ever could. It taught you that protecting your peace is not selfish. It is necessary. You finally realized that every yes to disrespect was a no to your own self-respect. Every compromise of your values weakened your confidence a little more. So you made a decision. You stopped negotiating with behavior that destroyed your peace. You stopped lowering your standards to fit into places where you were never respected. You stopped chasing people who only appreciated you when you were convenient. At first, some called you cold, others called you arrogant, but the truth was much simpler. You had finally learned the difference between being available and being valuable. The people who benefited from your weak boundaries disliked your stronger ones because they could no longer use you the way they once did. One of the greatest signs that you've grown is that your focus no longer lives in the opinions of other people. You used to wonder what everyone thought about you. You worried about criticism. You replayed conversations in your head, hoping people understood your intentions. But wisdom changes your priorities. You begin to understand that not everyone deserves an explanation, and not every misunderstanding needs to be corrected. Time is too valuable to spend trying to convince people who have already chosen their version of your story. Instead of chasing approval, you chase excellence. Instead of defending your reputation every day, you strengthen your character every day. Character always outlasts reputation because reputation depends on other people's opinions, while character depends on your own choices. That's why people eventually stop questioning you. They may not admit it out loud, but deep inside they recognize something undeniable. They can criticize your past, but they cannot argue with your consistency. They can dislike your success, but they cannot deny your discipline. They can spread rumors, but they cannot erase your results. Eventually, your life becomes the loudest answer to every false story ever told about you. Purpose has become your greatest source of strength. You no longer wake up trying to prove someone wrong. You wake up trying to become a better version of yourself than you were yesterday. That shift changes everything. When your purpose becomes greater than your pride, distractions lose their power. You stop wasting energy on petty conflicts because you know where you're going. You stop competing with people who aren't even running the same race because your destination is different. You stop allowing temporary emotions to interrupt permanent goals because you understand that every unnecessary argument steals time you could have invested in your future. The people watching you don't understand why you no longer respond the way you used to. They don't understand why their criticism no longer slows you down or why their negativity no longer reaches you. What they fail to realize is that a person driven by purpose becomes incredibly difficult to distract. Their eyes remain fixed on the vision, not the noise surrounding it. Now, they know you're not to be played with because you've become someone who cannot be easily shaken. Your confidence is built on discipline. Your peace is protected by boundaries. Your strength is reinforced by experience. Your wisdom is shaped by every hardship you refuse to let define you. You no longer chase validation because you've discovered your value. You no longer fear rejection because you've learned that the wrong people walking away often makes room for the right opportunities to arrive. You no longer waste your energy trying to prove your greatness because greatness never needs permission to exist. It simply continues growing, one disciplined decision at a time. And that's the lesson people finally understand. They cannot manipulate someone who knows their worth. They cannot intimidate someone who has already survived life's hardest battles. They cannot distract someone whose purpose is stronger than public opinion. They cannot defeat someone who refuses to quit. That's why the same people who once underestimated you now watch from a distance with a different kind of respect. Not because you demanded it, not because you sought revenge, but because your life has become undeniable evidence of what happens when an ordinary person commits to extraordinary discipline, unwavering self-respect, and relentless purpose. They finally understand that you were never someone to be played with. You were simply someone who hadn't yet revealed the full measure of your strength. The truth is simple. Life will always bring people who doubt you, test you, underestimate you, and try to convince you that you're less than who you were created to become. Some will mistake your kindness for weakness. Others will mistake your patience for fear. A few will even believe they can manipulate your emotions, control your decisions, and define your future. But none of those opinions have the power to shape your destiny unless you choose to believe them. The greatest victory is not proving your enemies wrong. The greatest victory is proving to yourself that no hardship, no betrayal, no rejection, and no setback can stop a person who refuses to surrender. Every challenge you faced was preparing you for this moment. Every disappointment was teaching you wisdom. Every obstacle was strengthening your character, and every painful experience was building a level of resilience that comfort could never produce. So from this day forward, stop shrinking yourself to make other people comfortable. Stop apologizing for your growth. Stop seeking permission to become everything you're capable of becoming. Walk with confidence, but remain humble. Stand firm in your values, but never lose your compassion. Protect your peace, guard your purpose, and let your discipline speak louder than your emotions. Remember, people may question your methods, criticize your progress, or misunderstand your silence, but they cannot stop a person whose faith is stronger than fear, whose character is stronger than temptation, and whose purpose is stronger than public opinion. Keep showing up, keep growing, keep learning, keep building. One disciplined decision at a time, one courageous step at a time, and one faithful day at a time. One day, you will look back and realize that the very people who tried to break your spirit unknowingly built your strength. The obstacles that seemed impossible became the reason you discovered your true potential. The rejection that once hurt you became the redirection that changed your life. And the battles you thought would destroy you became the stories that inspired others to keep fighting. That's when you'll understand that your greatest weapon was never your talent, your intelligence, or even your success. It was your refusal to quit. It was your decision to keep moving forward when everything around you said to give up. It was your commitment to becoming better instead of becoming bitter. Now they know you're not to be played with, not because you became harder, but because you became wiser, not because you sought revenge, but because you chose transformation, not because you demanded respect, but because you lived in a way that earned it. Let your life be the proof. Let your consistency be the message. Let your character be your legacy. And never forget this. When you master your mind, protect your peace, honor your purpose, and refuse to compromise your values, there is no force on earth that can permanently defeat you. The world will eventually recognize what you've known all along, that an unshakable spirit, disciplined heart, and relentless commitment to greatness create a person who was never meant to be controlled, never meant to be broken, and never, ever meant to be played with.